Hi there, and welcome to today's episode where we talk with Lisa Fitzpatrick about the pelvis. So, this episode is a little bit more steered towards our female listeners, but if you're a man, please don't run away. Don't be afraid. Join us, and together, let's learn a little bit more about this magical thing that all of the women in the world have, men as well, have pelvis. So, let's look into what wisdom, what power, what energy, what possibly trauma and judgments we held around our pelvis. Lisa is a physiotherapist, she's a yoga teacher, she has studied and researched and practiced so much around understanding the female health, about the pelvic floor. And she also talks about our sex and our power and so many wonderful things. So come in, join us, grab a cuppa or maybe a glass of wine, and let's learn more about the magic of our pelvics.
But before we start this conversation, here is your reminder. Do subscribe, hit that like, hit that share note button, as well as the notification button, because we really want to get these beautiful conversations out there to more and more listeners, because we get such wonderful advice, such wise wisdom, and our beautiful and wonderful gold nuggets. And thank you to those who have supported us and who have hit that subscribe. So hit subscribe, like, and share. But now let's get on with this wonderful and empowering conversation.
Hi, Lisa, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks, Lenka. How are you?
Really good. I'm so excited for this conversation. So, to get us started, could you let us know and our listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do? But I always add a little bit of a caveat to this question. I'm always curious to know what made you choose to go on this path. It's less about, I have these certifications, I have these qualifications, and I'm this professional. More about, well, I was inspired, and this gives me passion and fire, and I'm really finding purpose in doing what I do because, and kind of touching a little bit on the journey, because one thing I love exploring on this podcast is the becoming story. It's the origin story. It's the how did you turn out to be who you are and on the path that you're on.
I love that question too. Yes, so I am a female pelvic and sexual health educator, and I've been a physiotherapist also for 33 years. Clinic where I'm spending a lot of time examining the female pelvic physiology, which naturally builds us into really interesting discussions about intimacy. I feel that what brought me to this path has been with me since I was very young and interested in this idea about how do women find their way in a world that is very much, I guess, has been very masculine dominated. I'm not really sure why this feminist part of me has been so strong my whole life, but it definitely has been a current in all of my work because I've also been a yoga teacher as well. And I've also been a female empowerment coach. I do believe that there's a part of every woman that somehow is in a battle or in a stage right now where she's wrestling with this desire to be authentic in a world that's often removed her from her power. And quite often, for a woman who's quite spiritual in her nature, which is where a lot of my work intersects. I'm very interested in how the spiritual being of a human intersects with the physical body and how that plays out in the health system. I believe a lot of women have been removed from their spiritual power, and that in my work in the female pelvis, especially, the pelvis is a crucible that holds a lot of our centered, steady spiritual power. And if I can bring someone back to that centered, steady place, then at the very least, a lot of women feel, I think, they can find a confidence in themselves to speak up, to inhabit their lives more fully, and to feel safe in their bodies. Which, that's a worthy intention, I guess, for the work that I do.
I have so many questions. I'm so fascinated to dive into this topic because as you were talking, I'm starting to realize that, you know, there aren't that many parts of the female body that would be so crucial to so many aspects of our lives, from the pleasure to judgment to reproduction to shame. There's so many different emotions and things happening around that area, and yet it's one of those things that we never talk about. It's never discussed. It's never mentioned. It's not in the forefront of people's minds. If you think of the female physiology, if we talk about, health, if we talk about spirituality, emotions, we talk about the heart, we talk about, the energy. If we look about sexuality, we think about different aspects, but we really rarely think about this region. And I would love to know a little bit about, how do you look at the fact that there is still a lot of taboo around this area? That's probably one of the reasons
Mm.
why we don't discuss it, because there is the negativity, there
Yes.
is the bleeding, there is the, judgments around what's happening there, even when it comes to female pleasure. I'm curious to see,
Mm.
how are you coming across kind of this dynamic of, for you, you see how important it is, and if the world is absolutely quiet and ignoring and almost pretending that this doesn't
Mm.
exist, and if we talk about it,
Mm.
it's often with a little bit more of the negative connotations.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. It's such a good question. And my heart bleeds for the many women I see every week in my clinic who say to me, I feel like I'm the only woman going through this shameful secret or this terrible thing. And so often it's a condition that I might have seen a dozen times that week alone, let alone, for that woman to feel like she's the only woman going through this. And I think that because women are removed from the taboo of their bodies, or their bodies are objectified, so a lot of the openness in these conversations come through perhaps in the sexuality space that's not necessarily scientific or grounded or a safe place for some women to explore. Um, and then on the other hand, we have a very medicalized way of looking at things that sometimes also is very traumatic for women who are told that, what they're experiencing doesn't necessarily need to come with so many feelings and emotional and mental connotations, when really it's such a traumatizing thing for a woman to be either made to be too clinical, or to feel that she's exposed in a way that's really unsafe for her. So I think the world still has to come a long way before the narratives become positive ones, and particularly for women who are most likely to visit me, which is often either first after they've had their babies to prepare for recovery, or when they enter midlife, which is when a lot of tissue physiological change happens in the pelvis that starts to cause distressing symptoms. And that also starts to affect women's ability to be intimate. And I think that this midlife period represents a bridge of change for a lot of women that is very personal. And a lot of the unprocessed conversations and trauma and memories that she has start to surface during the midlife transition. And it can be very, very distressing, because a lot of the baggage that's sort of been pushed down in the body is surfacing at this particular time in her life. And I honestly, Lenka, feel this deep, empathic, compassionate, um, sometimes almost pain for the suffering that women go through that they feel silenced for. So it shows up in that way that I think these conversations are really well overdue. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for sharing that. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about sort of things that I've heard as well as my experiences as well. And one of the things that I have read up and been hearing about is a lot of the religions shun women, especially around the when the cycle arrives. And you have to be locked away. You can't be in the marital home, you can't be dealing with the children. You like locked away for a week because there's this thing that's happening to you that's disgusting. It's and so you have this idea that you've got to keep quiet, you've got to be locked away. And also when you are working in an environment, whether it's corporate or any environment where there are men, and you are going through that time of the month, and it's like, oh well, don't be so sensitive, what's your problem, just deal with it, and it's don't bring your problems to us. And sometimes it's really difficult to hold in those emotions. To You don't only have the emotional impact happening with all the hormones going all over the place, but you've also got that physical thing happening to you. And I know that sometimes it's a worry is, am I protected enough? Or am I going to leak? How am I near a toilet? Do I have enough things with me? Did I bring anything with me? Is it, and you have this almost, please don't let anything happen. Please don't let anything visible happen on what's going on. And there's been times, and I mean, I've experienced it when I know I have to leave instantly to go and deal with stuff. And it's like, why are you walking away? Don't be so rude. Come back here. And it's like, I have to go right now. And but you can't say, listen here, this is happening, I've got to leave, and know that you're accepted. You've sort of got to make excuses and just pray that you get to the bathroom in time. And there's, as you said, there's this shame, there's this guilt, there's this worry of not only with the emotional but the physical stuff that can be seen sometimes. And I think there's this shame, there's this, why can't you just deal with that at home? Do you have to bring that into the workplace? But unfortunately, it is not something you can just turn on and off, because I'm sure if we could, we would. But the thing is, it's this constant worry of what's going to happen. It's pain. It can be really painful at times, and you just don't, you can't be standing a long time, or you can't be sitting a long time, or you've got to move. So you having all this stuff happening, the pain, the bleeding, the emotions, and then you've got some guy who stands there, and not only guys, actually women as well. I've had women. Well, just deal with it. Don't make your issues my issues. And I'm like, I'm not. This is something that is out of my control. It happens. It happens on a monthly basis, and I'm doing the best I can. And I think that has been my experience. It's been really, really difficult to deal with that. But then, as I mentioned earlier, the shame of, right, it's that time of the month, you just go away, come back when you're normal, but it's not only at when you get the bleeding, but it's also throughout the month, the cycle, these hormones, the ovulation period, the everything. So we are constantly feels sometimes like we put through the mill on we just go round and round in this mill, and
Yes.
you're not getting that support. It's how can you survive it? So as you said, a lot of us just push it down and deal the best way we can, and try not to make a scene. don't be so
Mm,
sensitive. Oh,
mm,
what's all the drama about? And
mhm.
and even partners, sometimes they've had to go to the shop and buy stuff. I'm not doing that. Don't ever expect me to. That's embarrassing. I'm thinking, well, how do you think we feel? We got to do it on a, regular basis. And so sometimes there's not even that support of, okay, I've been, my first husband refused. My second husband, he's like, okay, what color? How does it look? He didn't have a problem. And that made a huge difference. But I know a lot of women don't even get that support at home, with
Yes,
families, with sons, especially
yes,
the male version of society is there
yes.
is none of that support. So it's
Mm.
really great that we are having this conversation because it happens to 50% of the population. This
Yes.
that happens. And it is not something that needs to be shunned, is not something where you just, man up or stop being so dramatic. It needs to be embraced. And in the good old days or olden days or way back, it was actually honored. It was actually something that was revered in a way. It was something that women we're proud of because it is what makes us women is the cycle, the child, then the maiden, and then the mother and the crone or the wise woman. I prefer wise woman to crone. And there is this phase that we go throughout our lives, and it's something that used to be revered. We really need to bring that back, that we don't have to feel so ashamed or worried or stressed over it, and rather embrace it. And it's almost embracing womanhood and embracing being a woman and being in our power, as you said, because I think it's something that makes us stand out because men don't have it. So it is something that is very uniquely female and woman. And it also, it used to be when girls used to then transition into, womanhood, it it was part of a process. It was, wow, you are stepping into a new thing. You are becoming something else. And I think we really need to bring that back. So this conversation is really wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing it. And my question now is how do you help your clients, and advice you can give to women who are listening to this, who do feel that pressure, who do feel that shame, who worry every month when they have to go to work or when they have to appear strong and keep going and put your big girl pants on or man up, all these lovely phrases that are thrown at us. What advice can you share for our listeners to help them to really step into this power that they have and to embrace it rather than shun it?
What a great question. I love that question. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for such a good question because for women who are carrying the sense of shame, there's I guess, an investment in the taboo that this particular conversation and topic has that can show up in us in our daily lives and impact the collective in very profound ways. So, what do I mean by that? So, what I mean by that is that there are some women who are capable of stepping into the role of demystifying and de shaming these experiences by becoming brave enough to normalize the situation in a way where there is a very deep ownership of what it means to be a female. So, what I mean by that is in the workspace, when a woman is needing to actually alter her work environment in some way. She needs to leave the meeting because she's just got her period, or she needs to take a few moments to heat up a hot pack because she's got such terrible menstrual cramps that she won't actually be able to concentrate on work. Those are the sorts of small acts that make a big difference. If a woman feels brave enough to own up to um, being, I guess, a little more vulnerable and visible in the way that she manages those particular situations. I had the most wonderful example of a female CEO who was really invested in the conversations, like the ones we're having now, where she wanted to develop the menstrual policies around her company and the menopause policies around her company. And because this was a female-led business, and I'm not saying we have to be leaders in our space to make a difference, because even the smallest gesture, like a woman saying, "Oh, I'm on my bleed, do you have a tampon?" to the next woman in the cubicle, that can be, I guess, a way of bringing, something shameful out into the open, where it can't be shamed when it's something that's been fully mobilized into the light. Yeah. But this particular CEO had a company tradition where the women who were on their periods, when they were in their periods, they had access to a bowl that contained some red wristbands. And when the days of their bleed, they were to invited, obviously voluntarily, to place the red wristband on their wrist. And what that meant was they were the women who were given some leeway. They were obviously, if they were heating up a hot pack or going to the bathroom, there was a code of honor around the fact that they needed to manage this particular thing that shouldn't be secretive but is now being honored. And I thought that was really where the world possibly needs to steer this. And I am hopeful, because what I see coming into my clinic now is a lot of the younger generation, and that they are actually consuming more information online about these things. They are bringing their partners into the clinic, talking about sex and periods and period pain more often. And really, some of it's about the confidence that they have to say, "I don't feel ashamed about this," or "I'm not going to let myself feel ashamed about this." And if I'm able to do that myself as a woman, I give permission to all those women around me who might have been shamed, in some way by society or by their families or by their religions. And that will, I think, have a ripple effect on a profound level for a lot of women, knowing that those small things make a big difference to the collective. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's so important for us to, bring in this voice in here to encourage everyone who may still feel a little unsure of putting themselves out there and speaking openly and opening up about their needs. What is that? It's absolutely the basic human decency, the basic needs. So thank you so much for that. But I would also love to look more into some of the positive sides, some of the positives that, this region can do for us. Or if we have maybe some, still a little bit of insecurities around it, how can we find our inner power? How can we leverage what we truly have and we've been given as a women? So I'm curious, you said you do physiotherapy, you work with women, but are there any things that, when you work with women to help them resolve, be it the physiological challenges, be it some of the emotional challenges, that then they start realizing that what aspects of their lives are improving, or what feedback are they coming with, or what are the positives that if we open up and we connect deeper and we remove some of the blocks, what is possible for us? What can we do?
What a fantastic question. Probably one of my favorite topics is this idea that as women, if we can inhabit ourselves fully inside the pelvic cauldron or the pelvic crucible, we have such an opportunity to show up in ways in the world where we have an impact in a positive way. Because even when we speak from this part of our bodies, our voices land with more impact. And when we also move through life where we're not pushing ourselves into a masculine kind of way of being, but we're also equally not so reclined that we're almost passive, that poise is what the pelvis holds for us, is a poise where we are quite balanced and steady in our nervous system. Yeah. So what I usually find in the clinic, and I'll say that this is quite a generalization, but it's something I see again and again and again. And if there was one thing I could speak to that enables a woman to experience the benefits of being in this part of her body, it is that so many women are living from the fixed diaphragmatic place in the body, which does give us access to the heart. You know, we have a lot of heart-centered wisdom in this world and in our women. We have a lot of capacity to speak through the higher parts of our physiology. But when we really learn how to breathe down into the pelvis and not up into the cerebral parts of our bodies. You know, we're taught to be very cerebral. We're taught to be very intellectualized. Our shoulders are often lifting with the breath. There's a lot of anxiety about living on the planet, yeah? But when we learn that the breath can actually travel down into the pelvic floor region and not always coming up, but often taking the diaphragm into a deeper excursion, then what that enables us to do is it enables us to access the deeper recesses of our bodies that need to have, first of all, physiologically, a good circulatory system in order to give us good fertility, in order to give us great immunity, in order to help us with our digestive system, in order to help us with a healthy bladder habit, and in order to help us enjoy sex and have sensual pleasure, we need the diaphragm to be moving down against the pelvic floor, massaging the abdominal organs, the reproductive organs, the other parts of our body. And the more we can perfect the art of moving the breath down into the pelvic floor, the more we can actually experience the physiological health benefits. And from those benefits and from this idea that we're actually inhabiting ourselves in the hardest to reach places, sometimes the most shameful parts of us want to stay hidden, then we occupy our bodies with a lot more integrity and fullness and authenticity that kind of allows us to say no to things very naturally and organically without even having to think about it. So it's like we are able to then set some very healthy boundaries from that place, because we all know what it's like when we're in a stress response. I'm sure a lot of women will understand how much that puts us. Sometimes they call it a fight or flight response. Sometimes it's called a freeze response. But in a lot of women, it shows up as a fawn response. Oh, what can I do to make this right? I want everything to be okay. I want everyone around me to feel all right. But actually, for our physiology to be healthy, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response is often taking us way above and out of our pelvic floor. When we truly come down into the pelvis and we occupy that pelvic breath, the power that we have to say no and to not necessarily consistently abandon ourselves in order to keep everybody happy. So I'm, tired of lighting myself on fire so that everybody else can stay warm. It's that sort of feeling. How do we reverse that trend so that women can stay really truthful about what they need to stay well, and what they also need to basically reverse the very alarming trend where fertility rates are dropping, where women are getting a lot of autoimmune conditions, including endometriosis, where women are experiencing more and more, I see in my clinic, a lot of painful intercourse, a lot of painful sex. There's a lot to be said about that with this obsession in the exercise space of having a lot of tension in the pelvic floor and the core muscles due to these Pilates crazes, when really the statue of Venus, or a lot of the ancient statues, showed a very soft-bellied woman, a woman able to take the breath down because the muscles aren't so locked up that they're causing these health issues that go across such a large spectrum of the system, that, everything from, digestive problems to fertility can be linked to the way we connect. So thank you. That was such a beautiful question.
And this was such a beautiful answer connecting, all of these aspects together. I do love that you mentioned that we are so, logical, cerebral. And we are often then being encouraged, follow your heart, for your gut. But again, I don't think we're enough encouraged to listen to your pelvis or understand your inner wisdom coming from really the bottom of our bodies. We're still kind of from like the stomach upwards rather than really grounding and going from even lower places. And I know that you mentioned that you're also a yoga teacher. I'm curious, are there any practices specifically, any types of breath work or any yoga movements or anything that people, women, can experience with, experiment with, explore to find a way of getting more of the, softer breath and the lower breath to, as you said, not necessarily go hardcore on the strength and muscle building, even though we know obviously muscles are important for women. We need to be maintaining our muscle mass and we want to be nice and toned and flexible and have, all of those good things. But at the same time, how do we make sure that we keep our region physiologically healthy to then allow us to tap into it more also on the spiritual and emotional ways as well?
Another fantastic question. It's really what got me interested in the pelvic physiology was the fact that in the yoga traditions, the base of the pelvis is a latent area for potentiality or kundalini to stay rooted in this root chakra or energy center, that yoga practices facilitate a release or an opening for women to access their power. But when we look at it from the point of view of actually engaging in asana and breath work, a lot of yogic practices were geared towards the male physiology. They weren't considering the fact that the female pelvis is quite a different physiology. And so when it comes to yoga practices, what I generally like to recommend is that there needs to be a lot of focus on being able to do what we call a full and complete yogic breath, which is where we take the breath in stages deeper into the body with several, I guess, attention points that point us downwards into our breath. And there is an unfortunate issue with a lot of yoga teachers that because there's a contraction of the pelvic floor known as mula bandha, which is where the core is a kind of place of steadiness for a lot of asana or postures, that a lot of yoga teachers actually also have the problem of an overactivated pelvic floor. Where that gets reversed is if they engage in a type of yin yoga practice where the body is lying flat. So we're not having to stand up and act against gravity. The body's able to really be held by gravity. And there's a lot of hip and pelvic stretching movements in yin yoga that are held for long enough periods that the muscles deep in the pelvic floor can actually let go. The sitting bones can move apart. I mean, even just if we're listening to this now and we tune into where our sitting bones are, you know, our sitting bones that are anchoring us into our chair, we can be holding so much tension in between the sitting bone area that we could even do a little scan of our bodies and say, what would it feel like for my sitting bones to actually be able to soften and release and receive my breath and receive my presence? And a lot of the yin practices allow us to stay in those open movements, which can also be confronting for women because we spend a lot of time in our lives protecting our bodies from the male gaze, from, I guess, being too expressive for fear of judgment. So when we do a yoga practice and it involves a lot of hip opening, often what I do find with my patients is they'll talk to me about how desire, feelings of sexuality do actually start to spring to life for them. And sometimes that can be distressing, especially if it's quite a strong sensation for them, because they are opening their bodies in ways that the body was designed to open in order to improve fertility. So this is a biological process. This is a natural thing. Unfortunately, when we start to bring spirituality into that space, we can start to run the risk of women feeling unsafe, you know, inside a space that's talking about sex and spirituality in the same sentence. So I feel very passionate about our medical professionals and people that have a grounded scientific wisdom and perhaps are also trauma sensitive, being able to have these more soulful connections to the holistic nature of care, so that when women are opening into their own sense of power, they have good therapeutic support to do that, as well as going into those physical practices. I hope I'm making sense there. It's a very holistic thing that we need to guide women with, which includes the trauma sensitive nature of opening the body's portals, because a lot of the unconscious trauma that we have been storing up in our system lives inside the pelvic basin. And this is researched. You know, this is pure science right now, that the research shows that if a woman has been shamed culturally, in a religious sense, or with trauma being a part of her conditioning as she was growing up, her nervous system will actually change the physiology in the pelvic floor muscles. And those pelvic floor muscles will cause more and more trouble for her as she goes through her adult life. And for some women, that reaches a real peak at midlife, at menopause. So we have a lot at stake if we continue to, I think, try and just talk about the concerns we might have. That's not quite enough sometimes, because the body keeps the score and the pelvis keeps the score. So it's almost like if we don't have an embodiment experience where somebody's therapeutically examining the muscles, supporting us to open physiologically, and taking us through a therapeutic process, then some of that baggage gets really, it gets really capable of inadvertently affecting the way that we actually function in our health journeys.
Wow, thank you for that. And Lenka and I are both passionate about yoga, and I've done yoga, but I've never thought about it the way that you've said. And like you said, Pilates is very, core based, and of course you've got HIIT and all the other exercises on top of it, which are high energy exercises. So it's really interesting about this, this yin yoga, to really just lie down and exercise. I mean, what's better than that? I love the idea. Just lie down and exercise. I know it's a bit more complicated than that, but that beats standing in a tree and balancing on one foot, whereas you can just lie down and really start to find ways to open up your pelvis and really start to feel into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the having that help and that support. But if you don't have that help and support, to maybe just do it slowly, a little bit at a
Mm-hmm.
time, and find ways to deal with what's coming up and finding the
Mm-hmm.
right people to help you. So thank you very much for that. That's really been an eye opener. And doing exercise or something specifically for the female body, and specifically focusing on an area other than build your core muscles, balance, just sweat it out for an hour at high impact, high energy, and then get on with your day. So it's really nice to have exercise that is more designed for or embraces the female body that doesn't always want to be active and high impact and standing like a tree. Because I know that at certain times of the month, there was no way, even if you had paid me $1 million, I was going to stand like a tree. It just wasn't working. And then a week later, I've got it. I can do it. I can even wave the leaves as well. So it is about just understanding your body and learning about what's coming up for you. And we've had guests, talking about the menstrual cycles and the cycles of that women go through. And I think, and that, some of the advice they were giving is start to really see what your cycle is. When are you more energetic? When are you feeling that it's coming about? When, how do you feel? When do you have those tearful days, or those days where you just want to slow down? And then you've got days where the Energizer Bunny has nothing on you. You just out there and doing. And then, of course, as you're getting into the menopause, is starting to really feel those shifts and try to not learn about them, but feel into them and embrace them and see, what does my body need right now? This is a slower day. This is a day where the brain is just turned off and gone on holiday and left you behind. Or it's a day that my brain's on fire. Man, I can solve all these mathematical equations. I'm on it, and just learning. And I think that's something that our listeners is really start to feel into what's happening with your body, whether you are, have had children, or trying to have children, or premenopausal, menopausal, whatever it is. How are you impacted? What is happening? I mean, even so far as what is the moon doing? Because we are impacted by the moon, we're impacted by so much, and really start to feel into that. And that might help when you're starting to do these exercises, that when that baggage is coming up, is starting to feel that and think, okay, what is it needing? Where can I get the help for this? And it just learning to listen. And I think this is something that a lot of women struggle with, is this listening to your own body, listening to what is saying. Because that little brain is like, I got to do this, I've got to be on it, dinner needs to be done, I've got that email to sort out, I've got to do. So it's just learning to, like, hang on a minute, let me see what's happening. Why am I looking at this advert and I just want to cry? What the hell's going on? What is happening? And I think that is so important. And you've really explained that. It's just starting to, I'm using my hands a lot, but I'm trying to get the breath down. Get it down there. So thank you so much for that. That's been really helpful to just take that moment and just focus on that area that we're not taught to focus on. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
Really appreciate all the advice and everything that you have shared with us.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
So this is the place in the episode that what we call the gold nugget. Lisa, may we please have your gold nugget?
What a pleasure. I feel so honored to be asked that question too. Thank you for such a great opportunity to, on the subject of gold and the golden goose. So let's talk about the golden goose. The golden goose is, the goose that produces all of the eggs for everybody else's benefit, everybody else's nourishment. And if we cook the golden goose, then the golden goose can't help all of the the whole village that is provided for by the golden goose. And so as women, we absolutely we live inside this crucible of that often contains a lot of heat and transformation, and society's often looking at us to do a lot of multitasking and to provide the golden eggs and to be everything to everyone. And my gold nugget would come back to the fact that if we cook the golden goose, there's nothing for anyone. Whilst I'm not a big fan of the analogy, put your oxygen mask on because you're the, if you don't survive, nor will your children. But I am virtually saying that our own internal sense of what we need for our body's nourishment and for our nervous system, that becomes a pivot point for us to also step into a style of feminine leadership that gives everyone around us also permission, especially the women around us, to also honor, that radical self-care. And I'll call it radical because it's a political act of defiance for any woman to say, I'm taking up some space on the couch. I'm not actually moving. I'm going to rest because my system requires me to rest. To me, that's probably the most disruptive political act a lot of women can actually perform in this world that will, in fact, support some change, I think, in the narrative around, well, if we just do it, we just get taken for granted. It just gets taken for granted that we keep producing the eggs. And what I see in the clinic is that where it catches up with women, so we might be able to get away with this while we have a lot of estrogen, although a lot of women who are cycling still burn out. By the time we get to midlife, we will experience a moment where we hit a wall if we don't prepare for this moment well. We will hit a wall where there is no possible way that we can override our nervous system for a moment longer. So my golden nugget, it comes down to this idea that if we start tending to the nervous system's capacity now, we absolutely will prepare ourselves for a really quite a good midlife transition. But if we just wait until the perimenopausal years catch up and we face menopause at 51 without having done some work on our nervous system's capacity, we will absolutely find that there's a moment we reach as women where we just cannot be in the same body in the same way for a moment longer. And I guess I have a passion to save women from this midlife crisis that menopause can be, because the truth is it's meant to be an initiation for a very positive time in our lives as women. And the narratives have taken us away to a very negative space. So we've got a lot to look forward to as women. Women in their between 45 and 55 are more likely to suicide than any other group of women on the planet. Women in their 60s and 70s report that they are the happiest they've ever been. So if we cross the bridge with awareness, we get to the end of the rainbow where the golden the gold is while we're on the gold analogy. And it's worth us understanding that, crossing that bridge requires radical self-care. That's my golden nugget.
Thank you so much. And I love the idea that we are the golden goose and we don't cook ourselves. Don't cook the golden goose, but also this radical self-care. Thank you so much. I wish I had this conversation 10 years ago. I think it would have made transition smoother for me, but it's never too late. And even though I am in that menopausal process, it's never too late to start. So thank you so much, and thank you for everything you've shared, and the golden goose, the golden nugget, and the pot or the gold at the bottom of the rainbow. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And it's just such a lovely visual. So this is why we love our golden nuggets. We always get something really precious and powerful in that. So again, thank you. For our listeners, if they are need, they want some help with this, they want to find how to not hit that wall when they getting into menopause, or they want to really start embracing their power and finding ways that they can have the courage and the strength to say in corporate environment or work environment, you know what, I need some time out, or just finding ways that they can find their own balance, or just want to be in your circle, where can people find you?
So the best place to find me would be on Instagram at the Lisa Fitzpatrick. I also have a website that is a portal for my Substack blogging and all of my writing, which includes menopausal writing, but also other pelvic health and sexual health tips. And that is at www.sexymenopause.com. And I look forward to releasing my Sexy Menopause book on the 27th of October 2026. And it's just been an absolute delight to speak to you both. So thank you so much for inviting me on your amazing podcast.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing so many interesting and insightful things with us and taking the time to educate us and empower us. And for our listeners, all the links that Lisa has mentioned will be down below in the description, so you can click and find her. And yes, do you have a wait list or anything for people to get signed up so they can get notified when the book is coming out so they can be ready for it?
Yes, the best place to be on that, wait list is to subscribe to my free blog on Substack, and that will be notifying the updates as we go, or follow me on Instagram, because I'll be certainly posting a lot in this next 6 months about that. I look forward to sharing the book with women who are in perimenopause and beyond. So perimenopause can start as early as 35. And the book is written for women to really understand that it is a bridge and a journey that might take 15 or 20 years. Some women will cross it in 5 years, but it is a journey. So I'm so grateful, and it's such a privilege to be able to share these conversations with amazing women like yourself. And thank you.
I'm really looking forward to this book. I think from what I've learned on this journey with the podcast that, it's never too early to start learning. And I think I feel so much more confident coming into this age where it can happen any day now, who knows? But knowing that, being equipped with people and tools and knowledge and insights of what's coming up. So I think even though you said it is for, women coming to the perimenopause, I think even younger women, girls who already are, if you're over 20, you're coming to the 30s, you really should start learning about these things. It's coming. And as you said, it's such a big part of our lives. It is a long chapter of our lives. It's not something you're like, just get it over with. We can enjoy it, we can lean into it, we can come to it without the fear. So I'm personally so excited to see your book coming out and see the content around it. But before we let you go, we have the habit on this podcast to want to squeeze in one last question and get a little bit more insight into our guests. And our mission here is to find ways to live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. And we do it by finding ways to lean more into life. And I'm always curious to know from our guests what gives you life right now. And it can be work related, it can be about the topics we talked about, or it could be something just purely from your life, from what are you enjoying, what brings you life right now.
Oh, I love, love, love these questions. What brings me the most life right now is knowing that I am in complete surrender to a benevolence that is accessible to all of us, that we are all equals, that as a human being on the planet right now, we actually have access to this benevolent force that only wants good things to come, even from the bad. So, what gives me a lot of life is understanding that I trust the process of life implicitly to actually turn any situation, whether it's a perceived negative in the human judgment or whether it's a fantastic, experience, that everything is actually happening for a reason. And there's so much relief that I don't have to be chief executive officer of the universe, in knowing that that there's something much bigger than us that wants to come through us. Particularly, I think for women at this time, women are showing up for their own bodies, in their own power, in new and exciting ways. The patriarchy's slowly but surely coming to terms with these new voices of balance that are here to provide balance. I get a lot of life thinking about that.
Wow. Thank you so much for that and for sharing and reminding us that there is so much more and we are so much more. So thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And I know Lenka and I are in the morning, but you've had a long day. So we really appreciate the energy you've given us, the wisdom you shared with us, and just giving us a bit more knowledge and permissions about us as women. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Been an absolute privilege. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to know we can connect in this way across the oceans.
And for our listeners, what have you got today, especially the women listeners? Is this a topic that you have felt shame around, or is this a topic you are embracing? Are you finding your voice within your workspace? Are you taking that time to sit on the couch and just honor yourself? Or are you still feeling that shame and that stress around the monthly cycles through your emotions? We would love to know what aha moments you've got from this. And for our male listeners, what have you learned from today and how can you support the women in your life, whether it's your mother, whether it's your wife or a sister or your daughter? We would love to know your perspective on having listened to this episode. So thank you very much. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.